Let's talk Goetia. Or let's talk Solomonic magic, but specifically let's talk about Goetia. Here's a classic Goetic circle or Solomonic magic circle. There's a triangle. That's where the spirit goes. And there's a circle. That's where the magician goes. Now this cool snake here has all the divine words and or the divine names and the angelic or archangelic names of the tree of life, going from Kether all the way to Yesod. Those are the traditional pecking order of spirits, starting at the top with God itself, then the archangel. And so those are all names in Hebrew of those particular angels. The magician himself or herself stands in the middle and is representing all the forces of Malkuth itself. So the magician grounds it. But anyway, that's a traditional circle. Do you have to do that? No. But you got to sort of understand why all of that stuff was important to one magician. And you might want to make your own circle a little later. There's something that Crowley used. And here's something that I use. Those are names that are important to me. My circle has, I've replaced Perdurabo and Layla with my own personal things. But anyway, and why do I bring up the Goetia? Because we're on the second to the last day of talking about Tarot of Ceremonial Magic. I hope you get this book if you don't have it already. It's that's where all of this information is. And we're talking about Solomonic magic or Goetic magic because on each of the 36 small cards, the 2s through 10s of each suit, are a pair of Goetic spirits. One for the day, one for the night. The reason I've chosen this as an illustration for today is because 10 of Cups is today's card. It represents this decan of the zodiac, this final 10 degrees of Pisces that we're in. And so these guys are resident on this card. Now, does that mean that you can only whip up Stalos or Andromalius in this 10-day period? No. Does it mean that you have to evoke Stalos in the daytime during this period and Andromalius at the nighttime in this period? No. Not in particular. But it all depends on how the magician is using these cards as magical tools. Sometimes it could be. You might actually ask the question to the universe, oh, what Goetic spirit is the one that's going to help me out tonight in this terrible problem of mine, okay? And you may draw this card no matter what the day of the year is and get this. Okay. Or if you'd said a question that had something that was time related, then it might refer to the date spread that we've got here. It all depends on how you're using it, how the magician uses it. So, but anyway, we're going to talk about Goetic evocation because we're at, uh, let's see here, technically it's appendix number 4 on this book, starting on page 249. And it's a pretty long appendix, and so we'll start it today and finish it tomorrow if you're making plans. Goetic evocation. The trappings of Goetic evocation resemble a Christopher Lee horror film. The magician stands inside a magic circle, protected by the names of God, archangels, angels, and other Kabbalistic words of power. By a combination of powerful yet eloquent exorcisms and terrifyingly incomprehensible barbarous words of evocation, the magician calls forth a demon from the pits of hell and traps it in a magical circle. There, it reluctantly waits to hear its master's instructions. Then, as is usually the case in horror films, the magician becomes of somewhat tragic character. Oh, excuse me. The magician, because of some tragic character flaw, and you always know in the movie what his character flaw is going to be. He loves a girl, or he's hung up on revenge or something. So, as is usually the case in horror film, the magician, because of some tragic character flaw or unresolved issue stemming from his childhood in a dysfunctional family, he loses his grip on the demon and is plunged to hell after being killed in a most unspeakably grotesque yet poetically fitting manner. While it's true that Goetic evocations are sometimes accompanied by strange, sometimes unexplainable phenomena, in nearly 20 years of practice, when this book was written, I have yet to encounter anything resembling the above colorful scenario. I do recognize, to the filmmaker's credit, the basic elements of this form of magic. Yes, the magician stands inside a magical circle upon which are divine names. Yes, the spirit is called forth by conjurations and strange words, and is trapped in the triangle. Yes, the spirit is of the infernal variety and, at least in the mind of the magician, can be very dangerous if not carefully controlled. The obvious question becomes at this point, why on earth would anyone in their right mind involve themselves in such an enterprise? For those of you who have not been irreparably damaged by simplistic and paranoid religious programming, the answer lies in the understanding of the term infernal spirit. How many of us can truthfully say that we've never allowed greed or jealousy or insecurity or lust or laziness to ruin a potential triumph? How many times have you said to yourself, I'm my own worst enemy? Couldn't these bad habits and character flaws be viewed as nasty little imps who pop up at the worst possible times and torpedo even the best laid plans? Wouldn't we just love to master them and force them to work for our benefit instead of our undoing? Crowley, well, certainly from one perspective, Hell is our own psyche, and the infernal spirits can be considered portions of the unconscious mind or aspects of our emotional life. Up until the moment of evocation, these demons remain uncontrolled and undirected. The various spirits of classical magical literature are convenient, and some say uncannily accurate, personifications of these potential powers. What makes them dangerous is the fact that unless they are called forth and forced to labor in harmony with the magician's will, they will continue to run amok and work their mischief. And if I may pause for a second and add, I'm not saying that just because the spirits are portions of your own psyche, that I'm discounting or arguing with anyone that says that these spirits are outside of ourselves, outside of our minds, and have an independent, objective existence all their own. What I am saying is our own minds, the parts of our minds that these spirits are for us, for practical purposes, are also much, much more than our own minds. Rabbi Ben Clifford said, it's all in your head, but you just have no idea how big your head is. Don't even try to get into an argument with me about the objective or subjective nature of the spirits, because even objectivity is subjective. We have no idea how big of a matrix, if you will, consciousness is. And we are just terminals in the great consciousness network. Our real reality is the network itself. And what we're identifying with seems separate and apart. But it isn't, because there is no such thing as apart. But I digress. The 72 spirits of the Goetia are drawn from one of the best-known grimoires of all time, the Lesser Key of Solomon, the first book of the Lomegaton. And the Lomegaton, I've got a footnote here, is based usually on the Sloan manuscript numbers 2731 and 3648, currently housed in the British Library. These papers are dated from 1697 and appear to be one collector's attempt to have his favorite texts of Solomonic magic bound into a single volume. They bear evidence that their language has been modernized and that they were transcribed from far older volumes. How old, we don't know. Okay, can you just imagine that if you've been a practicing magician for, a number of years, you've really got a great book collection of really wild stuff that would drive your neighbors just bonkers if they knew what you had in your bookcase. But just imagine that you had some really, really good stuff that you've collected over the years. And that when you had a little time on your hand during a plague or something, you sort of took bits and pieces of your favorite stuff that you've collected and you put them in a nice bound book that, or blank book, that you've had, so you could have it all in one place. A desert island book that you could just pack up when you had to go someplace and have all your favorite magical hits in one place. As a matter of fact, that's what this book is to me. This is the single book I carry with me when I travel, because I've got all my favorite Goetia stuff, and I've got all my favorite Enochian stuff. I've got favorite Kabbalistic stuff and the astrological stuff. So imagine if you did that, and then in some weird, strange future, after humanity has passed through several minor dark ages and everything else, somebody gets a hold of your diary and they say, ooh, this is the Bible of magic. And I'm going to do all my magic just like I found in Lon's diaries. That's sort of what the Lemegeton is, okay? It's great stuff, for sure. But it is not in and of itself sacrosanct. So, just keep things in perspective. All this literature came from dorks just like you and me. Okay. Several of the spirits appear to be degenerated versions of gods of the ancients. As example, Baal, Ashtaroth, or Astarte, and Belial, while others appear to be the genie of the Alf Layla, Walayla, or 1001 Arabian Nights. Yes. Yes, you think that's fictional literature? No. 1001 Arabian Nights is a true grimoire. And a lot of the Goetic spirits appear to be drawn from that literature. Those who in the past copied and recopied the various texts of the Lemegeton were obviously not sympathetic to the pagan theology represented by the spirits. And so we can never be sure what the original attributes of the spirits actually were. The mere fact that they've come down to us as fallen angels of the classic Miltonian ilk is suspect in itself. Even more striking is the sex-negative attitude displayed by the fact that all the spirits are male, including the Dukes Ashtaroth, the goddess Astarte, and Gremory, who appears as a beautiful woman, and Vepar, a mermaid. Look, there are those whose opinions I respect very much who maintain that the spirits of the Goetia have an objective existence and can and do operate independently of the magician's will. There are others who aver that they are entirely subjective and have no existence outside of the magician's mind. Aleister Crowley went so far in his introduction to the Goetia to say that the spirits are portion of the human brain, which, if properly isolated and disciplined, can be of great aid to the magician. But elsewhere in his writings, it appears he takes an entirely different angle. Whatever the true nature of the spirits may be, it's obvious to anyone who has been bold or reckless enough to perform a Goetic evocation that things happen. It seems obvious that part of what makes the magic of evocation work is the magician's acceptance, at least temporarily, that the spirit's existence is objective. Goetic magicians fall into two broad categories: those that strive as far as humanly possible to replicate what they believe to be the original modus operandi, and those who don't. Neither, in my opinion, is necessarily superior to the other. It all depends upon the individual magician. If your religious convictions or sense of art is such that you feel that the evocation is doomed to failure if you do not have every word of every conjuration, constraint, or curse duly memorized exactly as it appears in the 1687 Sloane manuscript, If you believe that you'll be blasted, torn apart, and have your soul eaten by a hideous, halitosis snorting monster, if one Hebrew word in your magical circle is misspelled, then it is absolutely necessary and essential that you take the time to meticulously do all those things correctly. On the other hand, if you feel confident that there's a simple formula of attitude and action that's the key to a successful evocation, and that as long as the basic elements of that formula are mastered, that the operation will be a success, then it would be a waste of time to memorize conjurations that are meaningless to you, or guard your circle with the names of gods who you do not worship. It's probably clear to the reader that I fall into the latter category. Plus, I'm just lazy. Space prohibits me to adequately elucidate much further upon either the traditional or heretical Goetia. The best I can do is offer a brief outline of the system and refer you to two texts that I feel best represent the two schools of thought, at least at the time in 1991 or whenever it is I wrote this. The first book's The Goetia by Aleister Crowley, and Aleister Crowley's illustrated Goetia by myself and Dr. Christopher Hyatt. I would now add wonderful texts on Solomonic magic by modern authors too, Stephen Skinner. And I've also got another one called The Key to Solomon's Key, which might prove helpful too. But anyway, I really digress there, sorry. The former is a faithful reproduction of the first book of the Lemegeton, or Crowley's book, which is translated by S.L. MacGregor Mathers and introduced by Aleister Crowley. This text contains all the various conjurations and constraints, plus the seals and attributes of the spirits and many details relevant to a classical evocation. Anyone who seriously wants to embark upon Goetic evocation must be profoundly familiar with this text. The latter is an attempt by Dr. Hyatt and myself to point out the psychological treasures in Goetic evocation and give examples of modern invocations of the system. So that's the book, Aleister Crowley's Illustrated Goetia, still available in several editions. We have included selected classical conjurations and, of course, the seals and attributes of all the spirits. In this text also includes 72 illustrations by artist and Goetic magician and dear friend of the DuQuette family, David P. Wilson, who unfortunately has passed away quite a few years ago. Even if I were not co-author of this text, I would recommend it to any student of Goetia. Okay. Tomorrow, we will continue this chapter under the chapter heading Elements of Goetic Evocation. And hopefully, if all goes well, that'll bring our reading of Tarot of Ceremonial Magick to a conclusion. And on Saturday morning, we will start my first book with a major publisher, The Magic of Aleister Crowley. It started out as The Magic of Thelema, Handbook of the Rituals of Aleister Crowley. And for reasons that I'll mention later, when we expanded the text and put it out in the expanded second edition, We changed it to the Magic of Aleister Crowley, Handbook of the Rituals of Thelema. So, there we go. It's Friday. Start your weekend right now. And start it by being good to yourself. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law, love under will. See you tomorrow.